Hello everyone, NeaGat here. Welcome to another match of Littlewargame. Today I am bringing you a replay submitted by NorM, who is playing the blue pieces in the bottom right corner of Ravaged AA4, and he's playing against his opponent, Selfish, playing the red pieces in the top left corner of the map. So as we can see throughout the first couple minutes of the game, besides going for this house and a couple things, nothing too much is going on. So I'll go ahead and say some service announcements. If this is the first time you're visiting my channel, I try to make daily war game videos for your viewing pleasure. And for you guys to have fun to watch. So if you want to keep watching these videos, go ahead and subscribe, so you guys will have the best chance to watch the videos that come out the very next day. Alright, keeping an eye on what's going on here. NorM looks like he's going for a very standard opening. I don't suspect that NorM and Selfish have played against each other very often. As you can see through the first couple comments that were just exchanged here on the bottom of the map, NorM basically asks if Selfish has played very often, and this is usually a question that gets asked when you haven't seen another player on this in this game before. So it looks like Selfish, funny enough, particular to his name, he goes for a little bit of a greedy opening in the sense of he goes for this house and then he goes into a fast expand. So producing workers all the while saving and having enough workers to go for a second castle. Looks like he's following it up with a den and potentially an additional den. NorM simply going for one raider, so it looks like he'll be using this one raider to scout, and then he'll go for a castle right afterwards. So traditionally, what I like to do is I like to go for two raiders. That way, I can do a little bit more worker harass on the other side of the map. If this raider gets damaged, I can replace it with the replacement. But it looks like NorM does some interesting pathing. Typically, these raiders see and know of each other around the second of the map, or the center of the map, and it looks like NorM decided to forego that. And this is a very interesting option, as NorM doesn't know too much about what his opponent is going for up until this position. At home, NorM is going for a second barrack follow-up while also going for archers. So I'll go ahead and keep an eye on production by tabbing that over. But NorM, he's going straight for this very weak worker. Selfish trying to do a very good job of trying to keep it alive. And as we can see here, NorM is doing a very good job of scouting ahead and seeing what his opponent is going for. All the while, NorM producing more units at home. Selfish using his workers well to try and stop the raider. So as we can see here, typically in these openings, there's not enough forces at home to repel like 5 wolves from the beginning. Like this 2-wolf opening is usually okay against barracks, because usually this house and barrack is under construction. But it looks like NorM did this slightly earlier so that he would be able to get his archers out and capable of fighting these wolves. And NorM doing a fantastic job of trapping that wolf, as well as saving this one very weak worker that was on the side of the map. The fact that this raider was left alive as well could end up becoming a very big issue, especially as NorM might try to do some damage, especially some harassment to this third base, especially as he's consolidating power at home. Both of them blindly going for a third base, so Selfish, he is playing the Beast unit, so he would have the mobility to try and go for something like this. But NorM doing a very good job of threatening this worker, and while at the same time, Selfish doing a very good job of splitting his wolves so that NorM would not be able to get this worker and delay the third. So very, very fun micro battle that was happening there, especially as NorM overblinked and couldn't get to that one worker. At the same time, though, so they're both going for their third base. I'm very interested to see what NorM's follow-up is going to be. You know, he's doing a very good job of spending his resources and keeping on track of his supply. But typically on three bases, you want to have your tech choice, or you want to get some more barracks. So I'll be very curious to see what he decides to do with this additional resources. And it does look like he goes for his tech in this church, as well as going for additional units. It looks like we have a little bit of harassment going on. So NorM being unprepared with just part of his army being present, but it looks like he now gets his archers over and really does a good job of zoning those wolves away from being able to do any harassment, as we can tell. A little bit of a tech enhancement going on at the same time. So both of them being on three bases, both of them knowing that they need to get an advantage somewhere, and it looks like Selfish is deciding to do that in the form of upgrades, going for attack and defense upgrades likewise, or respectively, rather. Keeping an eye on what's going on here. So, like I said, we haven't really seen additional barracks come up at this point, so that's probably something I would try and do, get one or two additional barracks while on three bases. That way we can produce an army that is capable of withstanding a full frontal assault from this beast player. He's doing something that Selfish is doing something that I recommend in my videos, just because from my experience I've found it to be very good, and that is to have some of your units, especially if you're the one putting the pressure on, have some of your units in potential expansion locations. That way you can deny them to your opponent very easily without risking too much. I would much rather also see Selfish split up his army and put it in locations like these here, where he can really keep an eye on what's coming in and out of NorM's bases. Looks like Selfish is going for a fourth base, knowing especially that his opponent doesn't have one at this current moment, and NorM is going for additional barracks and production. I think he's doing something very similar to what I just said, except the opposite way around. And if Selfish would have had his units spread up in these different locations to block possible move outs, Selfish would have been able to see with those units exactly when his opponent is moving across the map. While this is all going on, I would be getting my third base or fourth base ready, rather. It looks like he's about to do that, so these units will start clashing, while at the same time this frontal army is going to go ahead and go up against each other. So as we can see here, the archers and the wolves are going up against each other. These archers are great in a ball, as they'll be able to do a lot of damage, while back at home, NorM was able to get his castle set up without any issues. So the interesting thing here is that NorM definitely had those soldiers that was really good at keeping those wolves at bay, and now these archers are really gonna wreck the snakes with their higher damage that they can deliver. NorM doing a very good job of setting up his fourth base. Selfish's fourth base is already up and running, and as we can see, both of these players are doing a very good job of keeping their resources low. That means they're spending a ton. They're both doing a very good job of producing, And as you can see, Selfish is now trying to redeem himself from the mistake of not having enough wolf dens throughout the lull of the game that had happened probably for the past, I want to say, 2 or 3 minutes before that engagement. NorM going for additional tech while at the same time harassing his opponent at his base. So as we can see here, very few archers for NorM, but these archers in support are doing a fantastic job of laying down the hurt for their opponent. When it looks like when Selfish gets down to just his snakes, he decides to peel off from that engagement, and so NorM, knowing that his archers are good in this situation, is going to keep going for more and more archers. I would like to see some soldiers to back this up, but it doesn't look like that's happening. As we can see, these archers and priest combination are doing a fantastic job against these snakes with upgrades, but just upgrades, nothing really in support like these archers have priests in support to give additional healing. And as we can see, most of the archers are in attacking range of at least some units. As we can see, the archers in the back are even firing against his opponent. Let's see what Selfish is trying to do to stay ahead of this situation. It looks like he's pulling workers to try and defeat this army as quickly and as efficiently as possible, even sending units around to get the surround on some of these archers as they attack forwards and just now are attacking backwards. Selfish constantly producing, trying to use all of his resources that he has saved up, about 200, 300 resources now. NorM going for a 5th expansion of his own, especially during the lull of this game at this point. So the Beast player is in a really interesting position. His units are not very strong anymore, especially against a barracks composition of soldier and archer. It's not because he's just now gone for upgrades. I realize this now. So NorM is going for upgrades, but usually overall, in a straight up fight, wolves and snakes don't do very well against Rex unless they have a numbers advantage, which is usually their typical advantage there. Looks like NorM no longer has any priests, but he does have soldier support, so he'll be able to hold off some workers while microing his archers forward in that fight. Workers are being pulled, trying to hold these archers at bay, and as you can see with this proper micro, NorM will be doing a very good job of killing the workers, especially as they come to his archer line and try to deal damage to his opponent. Snakes are doing a very good job of doing DPS, though, as we can see. While these workers are being pulled, the snakes are freely attacking with their extremely fast attack range. And as you can see, Selfish has lost a ton of workers at this point, but it is now NorM that has the disadvantage in terms of army size. And this will be very interesting to see, especially as Selfish pushes forward. Let's go ahead and take a look at the workers. The worker. So yes, Selfish is about 30 workers behind NorM, but as we can see, NorM not staying idle on his worker production, constantly producing workers, and thus had enough army to finally come and reply to this pressure, especially as it came in load. So it looks like we have about 3 bases versus 5 from NorM. And as we can see, NorM is floating a couple of resources. So I'm doing a very good job of pressuring, just constantly pressuring, constantly being on top of his production. As we can see, he's producing plenty of archers and upgrades while this entire fight is going on. And his opponent is too. So very, very well played. Looks like NorM is going to try and hold it off at this choke, making some units invisible so that they won't be attacked by these snakes. We have about 3 invisible or 4 invisible archers, and thus it won't be long until this army gets eliminated by units that they don't even see. So this is interesting. Personally, I think that priests are always very good at making It looks like Selfish GG'd out of that fight, knowing that he had already lost at least 2 bases of economy from all of his workers, and then knowing that his opponent had a much larger army than him. But I really thought that was a great game. Well played by both players, actually. The fact that from the beginning of the game, with this two den opening, Selfish was able to keep the pressure on, while NorM was able to defend at home up until the point where he was able to get an army advantage and really put the pressure on. Before I went into that tangent, I really thought NorM does a really good job of using his priests to give him an advantage even more than just healing. So I always know that priest's healing is like fantastic when you go up against prolonged engagements. The fact that you're constantly healing up while doing tons of damage with these units is fantastic. But to also make your units invisible, untargetable, and just constantly dishing damage to your opponent is also a great thing. Really well played by both these players. I thought they played fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed the build order that NorM went for, having those extra army units at home to deflect any pressure very early in the game, and then going for a very fast third base while scouting his opponent's third base with that raider, with that micro. So very nice. If you enjoyed watching these videos, please leave a like. Please subscribe. Also, write a comment if you think that maybe I missed something that happened in the game, or maybe you have different thoughts on some strategies that I went over and casted on. All right, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.